The objective of this example is to deploy our previously developed Java Servlet on Amazon Web Services Elastic Beanstalk. With regard to machine requirements, you will need to have the Java Development Kit and Apache Tomcat installed on your Windows machine. In contrast to other modules, we're going to be using JDK version 8.0 and Apache Tomcat version 8.5 in this module. The main resource for this project is named Tomcat 85 for Beanstalk, or Tomcat 8.5 for Beanstalk. It's in your downloadable materials. We're also going to highlight some other materials or some other resources along the way. With regard to knowledge requirements, you will have to be at least somewhat familiar with Amazon Web Services and how to access their user console, but there's plenty of great resources online to teach you about that. And I hope you'll consider joining my mailing list. No spam, just updates and corrections to lectures. Link to subscribe is on the screen. Also, check out my YouTube channel. Tons of free lectures. Again, the link is on the screen. So this module is going to cover the following topics. Obviously, we're going to go over the objectives of the module and all that good stuff. Then we're going to dive into a little bit background on AWS Elastic Beanstalk. Very brief, just sort of a functional understanding of what it does so we understand the role that it plays. Then we're going to go through the steps of the example, which require us to install Apache Tomcat or reinstall Apache Tomcat due to some version issues. We're going to restructure our Java Servlet for Elastic Beanstalk. So we're going to take the Tomcat 10 folder that we had used in the previous module, and we have to switch around the location of some of the folders. Then we're going to create our class as well as our project package, or package our project as a .war file, and then we're going to deploy the servlet to AWS Elastic Beanstalk and see how that works. So let's begin, like I said a second ago, by talking a little bit about AWS Elastic Beanstalk and what it does. So we want to spend 1 second talking about AWS Elastic Beanstalk. However, this is not going to be a very extensive introduction or review. The server, Elastic Beanstalk, is essentially one that allows others, such as AWS EC2 or S3, to work together. We chose to use this service because the documentation for Elastic Beanstalk explicitly notes Apache Tomcat and Java as potential applications or types of code that you can run. So we are preparing a module on Amazon Web Services which will potentially dive deeper into this topic. However, for now, all we need to know is that AWS Elastic Beanstalk is a service which allows us to quickly and easily deploy an Apache Tomcat servlet for the web for general access by the public or whoever you want to give access to. Now, this module is going to focus more on the question of how this may be done as opposed to the theory of what's going on behind the scenes. So the first step here is to install or reinstall Apache Tomcat version 8.5. So before we dive too far into this example, we must note that AWS Elastic Beanstalk is not currently updated or configured to employ the newest versions of the JDK and Apache Tomcat. So as such, we must, or at least from my experience, we must downgrade our servlet to Apache Tomcat 8.5 and JDK version 8.0. This will require two changes. The first is to download Tomcat version 8.5 and recreate the project. Unfortunately, you will have to go back to the Apache Tomcat webpage, download version 8.5, and transfer all of your important project files located within the web apps, name app 001 web inf directory, and we're going to have to change that to the new version of our project folder. Don't worry about copying any of your classes essentially, because we're going to have to replace those anyway. And this leads us to the second bullet, which is to compile the Java code with JDK version 8.0. However, fortunately, we do not need to reinstall the JDK. There's a shortcut we can use for that purpose. Step 2 of this example is to restructure the Java servlet for Elastic Beanstalk. So AWS Elastic Beanstalk requires that our web application archive, which is the WAR file, be set up using a specific structure as shown below. This is what the figure down here is. Now, this figure demonstrates that many of the files do not change locations when going from our previous Tomcat 10 folder to our new Tomcat 85 and then for Beanstalk, but I'm just going to refer to it as Tomcat 85. Now, one primary exception is going to be the Java source code. We're going to have to be extra careful with where we put those. Those are going to have to go into our /com folder. I'll show that in 1 second. Check out these resources if you're interested in looking at some of the background materials that I use to create this lesson. All right, so now let's break down this figure right here. What we have is everything in here is going to be part of our root folder. And that is the Tomcat 85. Now within it, at the first level, there's two important objects. First is the root.war. This is the package that at the very end we are going to upload to Elastic Beanstalk. So this is important. However, when you're creating your folder, this will not be present yet. Now what you are going to create is a second object in here. It's going to be a directory called source, src. And within that, it's going to have several other subdirectories, webinf, com, and then some other stuff, which we're not going to use, so I'm actually not going to talk about these down here. Now, within the webinf folder, there's going to be also several important things that we should be familiar with. Our classes folder, our library folder, and our web XML. So you'll see that for the most part, the webinf folder remains relatively unchanged. So we can take the webinf folder from Tomcat 10 and move it over to Tomcat 85. So let's take a look at the steps that I used in order to create this folder. So these steps down here summarize what is shown above. First step, we will have to create a new root folder, which we'll call Tomcat 85 for Beanstalk, and this is a downloadable resource based on the unzipped Tomcat version 8.5 directory that we discussed above. Once we have that folder unzipped, we're going to create one folder within this root called /source. That's again this guy right here. And within that folder, we're going to create two more folders, /com and /webinf. That's going to be this one, and then you have this one right here. Next, we copy servlet app.java from the older location, which was Tomcat 10, web apps, name app 001, webinf, source, package app, and that was the directory where the Java source code was located. So we copy it from there to the newer Tomcat 85 for Beanstalk, /source, /com, and package app. Don't forget to add your package folder in there. That is necessary. And so you can see that our Java code is going to be going inside of the com folder right there, which is outside of webinf. Next, we are going to copy pretty much everything left in our webinf folder from the old version to the new version. That's going to include our classes, our library folders, as well as the web.xml descriptor file. So we copy it from the older location, which is Tomcat 10, web apps, name app 001, webinf, to the new location, Tomcat 85, /source, /webinf. So in the end, it still ends up in the same webinf location. The most significant change is shown in the figure below. You can see down here what we have is our older Tomcat 10 folder. This is from the previous module. On the right hand side, we have the Tomcat 85 for Beanstalk. Okay, if you note, there's a slight mismatch of the name in the figure. It says Tomcat 10 for Beanstalk, and that was before I had made some of the changes, so please ignore that. But anyway, what you have here is our classes, our library, and our web XML file. And so we're taking all of those from our webinf directory and placing it into our new webinf directory. Then the other piece is you can't forget to go into our com folder, which would require us to go one step up and place your Java source files in there. All right, step 3. Creating a class and packaging our project as a .war file. Once our project folder is properly structured, we can compile the Java code using the appropriate, to create the appropriate .class file, as well as package our entire project as a .war file. We're going to do this in the following steps. So first, We open up our Windows command prompt or our terminal emulator, and we change the directory to our root folder, Tomcat 85 for Beanstalk /source, because this again is the location of our source code, source Java code. Next, we compile our servlet app.java file with the inclusion of the servlet-api.jar library in the class path and also using JDK release 8.0. Okay, so the first bullet represents or relates to this command here. Pretty straightforward. It's just changing the directory. I don't think there's too much that you need to see. Number 2 corresponds to this command here. Now let's take a little bit of a closer look. It has 4 parts. First is javac, which is calling the Java compiler. I'm going to come back to the second piece. Well, actually, I'll just go in order. Okay, second is -- release 8. Now this is telling our Java compiler to use JDK version 8.0, and that's the reason why we don't have to reinstall it. Next, we include in the class path our servlet-api.jar file, and you also have to make sure that you're including the location within the directories. So it's within the web-inf /library / then you have the location. Then the fourth piece is the actual source code to be compiled, and if we are assuming that we're in the source folder, that means in order to get to our source code, we have to go to subdirectory com, subdirectory package app, and that's going to be the location of our source file. Okay, now once we run this command and compile the code, within that same folder, our servlet app.class file will show up. Okay, and so we have to move it from the place where it popped up, which is source /com /package app. Again, the same location as the Java source code. And we need to move it to the appropriate classes folder. So Tomcat 85 /source /webinf /classes and then package app. We're essentially going to be putting it right in this spot right here, which is what you would expect. Next, or once our class is in the appropriate location, we can go ahead and package everything within our source /webinf directory to the root.war file, and that's going to be executed with this command down here, which is essentially jar-cvf root.war. It's essentially telling the command what the name of the target is going to be, and then we're only including our web-inf folder, but if you have more complicated examples later on, you can see that other resources that you want to include in the package, you simply just have to include them after root.war. So we can include the Java server pages, images, styling, JavaScript, and then that was the web-inf folder that I included. And so you can see down here, initially, our class folder is in the same folder, our class file is in the same folder as our Java source code, but we have to remember to move that over to the appropriate classes folder within web-inf. And then so this relates strongly to step number 3. And then down here we see this is strongly related to step number 4. It shows that once we have run our packaging command, you'll see we have a root.war object which shows up within Tomcat 85 for Beanstalk /source. Step 4 asks us to deploy our servlet to Amazon Web Services Elastic Beanstalk. Now, once our root.war package is available, we can begin the process of deploying it to Elastic Beanstalk. We're not going to go through all the steps of creating an AWS account. Our hope is to create another module on AWS in the near future. But for now, we recommend you can either use some other courses available on this website or check out the AWS documentation online to create your free tier account. Just a quick note, you should only need a free tier account for this. It may ask you for a credit card, but you shouldn't actually be charged for it. And so the figures that we're going to talk about in 1 second do a really great job of showing us how to deploy our servlet using Amazon Web Services Elastic Beanstalk. So let's begin right here. This is a screen that we can get to after we have already logged in to Amazon Web Services. Now, once you log in, you should be able to simply just search for Elastic Beanstalk using the search bar at the top of the console screen, or you can go to the list of services and actually find Elastic Beanstalk. Now, at the time that I did this example, this right here is what the first screen looked like, and I clicked on the button which asked us to create a new application. Now, that brought us over to this screen right here, create a web app. So all I really had to do was just supply a name, which I called mine Dees Servlet 0414. And this name doesn't need to have any relation to those we've previously used, meaning that it doesn't have to match the package name, the Java source code name, or the servlet name that we used inside of our package previously. Now, once we enter this name, we're actually just going to scroll downward. And within that same screen, you'll see a box that looks like this, which asks us to choose the platform that we want to use. We are going to choose Tomcat. And again, now you can see why we decided to use Elastic Beanstalk as the basis for deploying this servlet is because of the compatibility with Tomcat. Now, once we click this drop down will go away and it will leave us with a screen that looks similar to what we have at the right here. So this piece of it right here is actually the pull down. Okay, but once it goes back up and we've made our choice, you'll see there's several other options that we have. The platform branch, we're going to use Tomcat 8.5 with Java 8 running on a 64-bit Amazon Linux machine. You can go and click on this if you'd like. There are other options. This is the one that makes the most sense for the implementation that we've used. I'm not going to go into detail and talk about the other implementations. It would just be an unnecessary sidetrack at this point. And then the platform version, we picked the newest platform version. You'll note that in the platform branch, however, there are no newer versions of Tomcat nor newer versions of Java JDK that are available, or at least not at the moment that I was creating this material. Okay, now still scrolling downward, we're still on the same screen, moving down, down, down. You'll see that we get to the part where we have to actually talk about the code for application. We are going to upload our own code, and we are going to create a version label, which I called mine Dees Servlet source code version 001. Now we are going to choose a local file, and we click on this button right here, and this is where we actually upload the root.war package that we created in the previous step. When you click on this button, it'll bring up a Windows Explorer window, and you'll be able to click it and upload it and everything. Now, once you've done that, there's actually a button in the bottom right hand corner here that says or asks you if you want to create your application. You'll click on that, and that will take you to an interim screen and then take you right here. Now, why did I not show the interim screen? The interim screen is just a whole bunch of status updates. It'll show some warnings. If you have errors in the implementation, it'll show errors. But to be honest with you, it's a lot of text, and it's really easiest just to wait until it's done compiling, and then at that point you can see whether it works or not. I would say probably you'd have to be more advanced or more experienced working with Amazon Web Services in order to get too much out of that intermediate screen. Now note that this may take a while. Depending on the traffic levels and your internet speed and the size of your package, it can take 30 seconds, a minute, 2 minutes in order to get your servlet ready. I was using only the example, so that's still relatively small. I imagine if you're using a larger package, then it could even last into the 10-20 minute range. I don't know exactly what the ceiling is there. However, after we're done with this intermediate screen, it'll lead us to a screen that looks like this. This is actually right here, just the top left-hand corner. There's some other stuff down here. You'll see there's one main thing is something called the health. And essentially you can have green, gray, or red. Okay, as you would imagine, green is good, red is bad, and gray is somewhere in between. I'm not sure if they have other colors, but those are the only 3 colors I've seen. It will potentially work if you're in the green or gray region, because gray normally indicates that there's warnings but not any serious errors. Now, if you look here, you'll see that it gives us a link that we can click to bring up our application, and that should load in a normal browser. And so you can see in the last piece of this graphic here, I took the URL, I copied and pasted it, or simply just clicked on it, which brought up the URL, and then you can see I got the same result as before. Now don't forget to add your URL pattern right here. Just like how before we had local host :8080, and then we had / I think we had to put the package. You don't need that here, but you do need the URL pattern, which was say hello. And it should be the same pattern that you used previously, because it's getting that value from the same web.xml value. And so everything will be defined in the same way. So if you initially click on this link right here and you get nothing, check really quick to make sure that you've included the proper URL pattern. And then once we've done that, you can see here that it's working. Request URI is the same. We have the protocol, the remote address, a random number is generated. And I'm going to try my best to keep this servlet running indefinitely. And it may be accessed using resource 904. It's just a link that you can click on. So that marks the end of this module. We were able to take the servlet we created in the previous lesson, repackage it as a WAR file such that it meets the requirements of AWS Elastic Beanstalk. We took that package, uploaded it to the cloud, deployed it, and we were able to see it actually working. We just showed that a second ago. We took the URL from Elastic Beanstalk, plugged it into our browser, and we saw the results of our servlet the same way someone in New Zealand or Russia would see that same thing. And I think this is a really great example because it's so useful. There's so many different types of applications. I know we harp a lot on Internet of Things, but there's so many different applications that require us to do something along those lines. Now, in the next module, we're going to take it just a step further, and we're going to dive more into the world of microservices and potentially even creating our own API.